What I've found over time, as someone who isn't naturally super strict with myself or rigid, is that you need a different approach to self-discipline if that's how you are. Which is why in this video, I want to talk about the 4 ingredients that you need for self-discipline. So let's talk about the first ingredient for self-discipline if you want to make the changes that you want to make, but you don't thrive on strictness and pressure. And that ingredient is self-trust. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. The higher your self-trust is, the easier you will find it to make the changes that you say you want to make. Before you even start thinking about being disciplined and setting goals and having consistent habits, you need to start thinking about your self-trust. To demonstrate exactly what I mean, I want you to imagine that you are your 7-year-old self. But in this reality, as the 7-year-old, you have this parent. This parent forces you to spend your free time with the neighbor's kids, and they know that you don't like the neighbor's kids. They tell you to stop painting, to stop drawing, to stop playing because there are so many things to do. They force you to kiss your Aunt Martha on the lips, even though you've begged them not to make you do that. They are constantly forcing you to do things that just aren't in your best interest. Now imagine that you're getting older. Are you going to keep on listening to this parent and keep on doing what they tell you to do? Or are you going to start to rebel? Of course you're going to start to rebel because it's clear that they don't take into account your preferences. They don't care about what you value. They don't care about your nature, your likes, your dislikes. None of that is high on their priority list. Now put yourself into the present, and in this reality, you keep on setting 20 goals for yourself every year without asking, do I have the time, the energy, the attention to work on all these goals at once? You tell yourself you have to go to the gym 5 times a week, even though you're an introvert, you hate the gym. Gym workouts aren't your preferred form of movement. Maybe you say yes to other people when you should say no. Maybe you keep forcing yourself to hang out with people that you don't like. When you have a pattern of not considering yourself, a pattern of not considering your own nature, your preferences, your likes, dislikes, you slowly degrade your self-trust. And when you don't have self-trust, it is really hard to have any self-discipline. If you want to get to a point where you listen to you, you have to work on being a better self-manager. Think of it as if you have 2 parts of yourself. So there's you, the doer, the person who's doing stuff day to day, and then you have you, the manager. That's the person who maybe creates the plans for your week, sets the vision. And in this scenario, you can either choose to be a really bad manager who never takes into account their employees' preferences, strengths, who impulsively dumps work on them without going, do they have the capacity for this? Or you can be the good manager that gets to know their employee and goes, okay, I've got a sense of their vibe, maybe where their weaknesses are. And I'm gonna take all of that into account when I delegate them work. I'm gonna use that knowledge to make their lives easier so that we get to our vision quicker and with more ease and with more flow and with more fun. And this goes against a lot of self-helpy advice, which is very self-control focused. So if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I need some practical examples. I don't really understand how to apply that in my own life. Here are some examples from my life of when I've applied this idea. I got much more consistent with working out when I accepted the fact that HIIT workouts, at least for now, are a form of self-torture for me. For as long as I've known myself, I've preferred slow burn workouts. Making myself do HIIT would only make me dislike exercise. I got more consistent with meal planning when I accepted that my doer will not eat 3+ day old meal prep. I'm not going to be that person on Reddit that makes 15 meals in advance. I even got better with intentional spending when I re-accepted the fact that I like my home decor and my clothes to be light, peaceful, and minimal. No matter how many reels I see saying that I'm boring and beige, because that's not what's trending at the moment. When you deeply accept the fact that in some areas of your life, you just have natural preferences, and these are preferences that you didn't choose. I didn't sit there and go, you know what? I want to hate HIIT workouts. I want to love slow burn. But these are just preferences based on your nature. Self-discipline starts to get weirdly easier because you stop fighting yourself and you really start going, okay, here are the things I know to be true. Here are the preferences that I have that once again, I didn't handpick, but that's what I got. It is what it is. I know my cards. What can I do with them? And doing this is a self-trust building exercise that will lead to more self-discipline. A kid is going to trust a parent more if they know that that parent takes into account their preferences, their likes, their wants when they make choices for that kid. An employee is going to trust their boss more and be more likely to listen to them when they know that their boss has their best interests in mind. When they know that their boss has considered their preferences, their strengths, their weaknesses. Please don't get me wrong, everything sucks some of the time. Sometimes you got to do things that you don't want to do. But you don't get a trophy for being the person that is the best at forcing themselves to do things in ways that are unnatural to them when there's an option right over there of doing those same things in a way that feels more natural and more easy for you. So the first ingredient to more self-discipline in your life is self-trust. Here's a quick quiz to see where your self-trust sits. Number one, do you find that you often should on yourself, even about things that are kind of weird, like how you spend your free time? For example, things that I've shoulded on myself about are, I should enjoy solo travel. I should care about being good at eye makeup. I should read 100 books a year. Number two, do you find that you often put off fun for a later time, a later day, but that later time and later day doesn't come? Number three, do you say yes to stuff that you don't actually have the capacity for? Number four, do you often listen to even content creators like me, hear my approach and go, okay, that's the way I have to do it, instead of going, okay, I'm going to try that, I'm going to see what works for me? Number five, do you often push yourself to keep going on tasks, even though there are visible signs that you need a break? For example, you're clicking around at random, so you're not really getting anything done. The more of these questions that you said yes to, the more likely it is that you need to work on your self-trust. So now let's talk about the ingredient that you need in order to develop more self-trust, which will lead you to a more self-disciplined life where it's easier to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Flexible thinking, which sounds really unsexy and boring. I want to give you a very direct example of exactly how a lack of flexible thinking will lead to things like doom scrolling, wasting your time, not following through on your healthy habits, procrastinating, and just overall self-sabotaging in your life. The story might not feel relevant at first, but after a while you'll be like, oh, I get it. There's a story about a guy called Ted Baldwin. Imagine Ted sitting in his office at work on his chair, stoked. He is beaming. And the reason that he's so happy is because his boss just came into the office and said, Ted, you did a really good job on that last project. Ted taps away at his little computer, keeps on working, riding the high of that compliment all day, until at around 3 p.m., his boss comes in again and says, hey, I actually have a new project for you to work on. Ted gets started straight away. And as everyone else in the office is leaving, he realizes, actually, I'm probably going to be here for a while working on this new project. Ted didn't actually need to stay late. He just felt as if he should get a head start. It almost felt like he had no choice but to stay late to start working on this new project. And that was when he had a thought. Maybe after work, I go get a drink. Immediately after having that thought, he gets a sense of relief because he no longer feels pushed into a corner. He feels like he has a sense of control again. Ted ends up staying into the office well past 8 p.m. and as he drives home, he stops by a bar, gets a few drinks. In this scenario, Ted didn't have a drinking problem so much as he had a flexible thinking problem. At some point, he felt pushed into a corner like he had no choice but to stay late at work. If in that moment, Ted was able to step back and go, whoa, I clearly feel like I've been pushed into a corner here, like I have no choices, but that's not actually true, he might have realized that he had options. He could leave and accept the discomfort of someone not seeing him as a star employee that stays late. He could create a timeline of the work to reassure himself like, hey, you're going to get this done in time. None of these are perfect options, but they would have removed that feeling of I have no choice here. When your nervous system and your brain feel like they're pushed into a corner, feel like they have no options, it creates a sense of helplessness, and your brain hates the feeling of helplessness. And often that feeling of helplessness leads you to self-sabotage. That was a story about drinking. Hopefully you don't have a drinking problem, but you might have a time-wasting problem. Maybe you have a procrastination problem. Maybe you stay up late watching TV even though you know you need to go to sleep. Or you just self-sabotage in some other way that isn't very self-disciplined of you. Often when you do behaviors that look self-sabotaging on the outside, you look at that and it's easy to go, that's a lack of willpower. That's laziness. But what if it's actually your brain going, hey, in some area of my life, I feel like I've been robbed of time, robbed of choice, robbed of energy. Maybe you don't overwork like Ted, but maybe you keep on hanging out with people you don't like to hang out with. Maybe you keep on committing to doing things that you don't have the capacity to commit to. Maybe there are just situations in your life in which you feel helpless and you haven't taken the time to sit down and go, okay, how can I feel like I have more agency in these situations? Because when your brain feels like it is robbed of time, it's robbed of energy, it's robbed of options, it's pushed into a corner, it's gonna react with self-sabotage. By doing these unhelpful behaviors to almost get back what it feels that you've lost. You get better at flexible thinking by learning to pause in those moments and go, what are my options here? That's genuinely it. The more you start doing that, the more you'll notice yourself not leaning into self-sabotage. Talk about the next ingredient for self-discipline. Should you be someone who does not want rigidity and control to dominate your life, but you have changes that you want to make You have a vision board that you want to achieve. And that is self-awareness. And I know there is going to be a segment of people that will hear this and say, I don't need any more of that. Trust me, I have enough. And you might, depending on your definition of self-awareness. I used to think I had a lot of self-awareness because I was like, you know what? I could list my flaws with ease. I can own my bad habits. I can own my mistakes. And give me half a chance, I could plot all of those things back to my childhood. I have so much information about myself, and yet all of that knowledge, that intellectual awareness didn't ever really help me with making changes. And don't get me wrong, knowing why you are the way you are can be helpful. It can be validating and reassuring, but it almost never leads to changing those patterns. What you need if you want to actually make changes is real self-awareness. Self-awareness that's more about observing, so noticing and going, what am I experiencing right now? Rather than self-analysis, which is usually what's wrong with me and why. All that sounds really fuzzy, so let me give you a solid example of how self-awareness that's more aligned with self-observation without judgment can actually help you to have more self-discipline and to make the changes that you want to make. Picture me when I was younger, lying on my couch in my track pants, watching Veronica Mars in the middle of a big old slump. So this isn't a cute situation. This is a situation where I have no motivation and I don't really understand why. I used to get these slumps and they would just stretch and I felt like I had no control over them. And I would use a bunch of band-aid tactics to try to help me to get out of these slumps. I tried a bunch of stuff until I started just being like, okay, well, this is the way I am. This is just a pattern that I fall into. Until I started practicing self-awareness, getting really observant of what was happening up to and in those moments. And that's when I realized that what I had was actually a habit loop. It was just a habit loop playing out over and over without my awareness. I'd have a trigger, so I'd sit there and be like, oh, I don't feel like I have much motivation. Then I would react to that trigger and go, that's really bad. You should be motivated at all times. That's not really normal for me because I'm a pretty productive person. This is bad, 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 bad. We need to fix it. Why am I feeling this way? What is this? Oh my God, oh my God. I panicked at my own feelings, which led to me feeling even more demotivated because when you panic at your feelings, you're inviting them to stay. What you resist persists. And then of course there was a behavior to escape all of those difficult feelings, which might be numbing, watching TV, whatever. And that led to a reward, which is part of every habit loop, which was being able to avoid my feelings. And the cycle would continue. And being able to map out that habit loop was life-changing. You might point to the end behavior, the end result of the habit loop and go, that's something that I do that I don't like. But if you don't know the loop that's playing out behind it, you're never going to be able to change the pattern. You'll point to the end result, you'll try to fix that instead of going, actually, I need to fix the trigger moment. Popping in here to let you know that in the Intention membership, I have the Productivity Loop 7-day workbook that helps you to map out day by day the exact loops that are keeping you stuck with a sense of self-awareness and not self-judgment. You can find it just here in the membership under worksheets. And if you haven't signed up to the membership, you should. It's $9 a month or $54 a year, and there are things like meditations, worksheets, mind prompt tracks. I got the best comment on my Getting Unstuck mind prompt track the other day. I'll have the link to sign up down in the description. It's very rare that you need to fix laziness. It's very rare that you even need to fix time-wasting behaviors. Instead, you need to be able to map the loop, and you need to focus your attention on that initial moment, not the end moment. But to do that requires self-awareness. Now let's talk about the fourth ingredient to self-discipline. If you want to lead a life where you're doing your healthy habits, achieving the things on your vision board, following through, but you don't want to live in a state of rigidity and strictness with yourself, which is creative open-mindedness. If you've been listening to this video and you have ADHD and you're thinking, but is this approach going to work for my brain? I would actually say this ingredient of self-discipline, generally, you're going to be better at than most people. People with ADHD have been shown to usually be a bit more creative. And being creative has never been something that anyone says is a good thing when it comes to self-discipline. I would argue the opposite. I think the more creative you are, the easier it can be to be self-disciplined, because you can think outside of the box. And if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not creative. Yes, you are. Everyone has the capacity to be creative. Maybe you can't draw, but if you can problem solve, that's a form of creativity. So here's what I mean when I say that creativity and open-mindedness can help you to be more self-disciplined. When you're creative, when you're open-minded, you can think of more ways to get the things that you want. You can think of more pathways to follow down. You'll also find it easier to collaborate with yourself, which is what I talked about earlier, because you'll be able to go, okay, I want to be working out consistently. And by nature, I don't want to go to a gym that looks like this. I don't want to feel like I'm constantly forcing myself to move my body. I want slow burn movement. I want movement in community because that's my preference. Knowing all these details, let's get creative. What are my options here? And this is problem solving. This is creativity applied to change, applied to habits, applied to your vision boards. This involves a little bit of the first ingredient and a little bit of this fourth ingredient. Firstly, you're going to have to collaborate with yourself and get really clear and honest with yourself about what it is you actually want, what you don't want, what your preferences are, and then you get to be creative and go, okay, I know all of this information. I'm going to brainstorm on it. I'm going to treat it like a puzzle. I'm going to treat it like a game. And this also makes change more fun. It makes change more novel. When you are deeply honest with yourself and then you go, okay, let's get creative, easy. Change starts to become easier for you. If you liked this video, I have a whole video about how to plan your time in ways that aren't time blocking. So if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I am someone who really likes flow, I like freedom, and I want to get things done, and I have goals, that video is one that you'll really love. It's one that a lot of people have loved.